right, so huge shout out to OnePlus for sending me out to the OnePlus 8 launch event. I really did appreciate the front row seats on my couch with the YouTube link. Thank you. No, but seriously guys, with all jokes aside, I do think they handled the launch event pretty well, especially with everything going on. But in today's video, I'm going to be talking about basically a rundown of everything inside the OnePlus 8 Pro and the 8, and I'll talk about my thoughts on these devices and the company as a whole later on in the video. So if you don't really care about the specs inside the new phones, I'll have a timestamp of me talking about my thoughts and opinions because I want that to be more the bulk of my video. So starting with the tech, I have all the notes that I took on my computer. I want to start off by saying I'm going to talk about the 8 Pro first, and then when I start talking about the 8, so I don't repeat myself, I'm only going to talk about the differences between the two. So the overall design of the 8 Pro and the 8 is the hole punch design, which I think is a bit interesting because I know on the OnePlus 7 it was a flawless display on the front. There was no notch, no hole punch. But with this design now, there's a hole punch, and the reasoning behind that was just because they wanted to make the phone a little bit lighter. And I think it also probably would have helped with the IP68 rating. Maybe the motorized camera was affecting that. The back is now matte frosted finish, and it also comes in glacial green, which I think is a very cool color. So the display now is 6.78 AMOLED. It's a Quad HD Plus of 1440p. The refresh rate is 120 Hertz, which is really, really nice. They do 240 Hertz sampling rate. The brightness now gets up to 1300. It's 10-bit color. It does now support HDR10 and 10 Plus. It has the automatic color temperature, which in Apple world is the True Tone technology. It has MEMC, which stands for motion estimation, motion compensation. Essentially, all that is smoothing out the frames when you do some video playback. You might see it on some TVs nowadays. It pretty much gives you that soap opera effect, and they have it off by default, which is nice because I know some people hate it. They also did a certification or a partnership with DisplayMate, and DisplayMate is basically just a company who rates their displays on probably the best smartphones. And OnePlus 8 Pro got an A+, which is the highest rating you can get, and it actually set 13 records, which is pretty impressive. Moving on to the cameras, it is now rocking a quad setup. It has 48 megapixel on the main camera, and on the ultra wide, an 8 megapixel telephoto lens, and a 5 megapixel color filter camera. And then on the front, we have a 16 megapixel camera. In terms of the internals, we have the Snapdragon 865 on a 5G chipset. There is 8 and 12 variants of low power DDR5 memory. We now have Wi-Fi 6, Bluetooth 5.0, 4,510 milliamp hour battery. We have Warp charging and also Warp wireless charging. So that's also really nice. And in wattage terms, that's basically just 30 watt charging, 30 watt wireless charging. And then we now have reverse charging, which is only 3 watts, but it's still really nice. In terms of Oxygen OS, we have Smooth Battle 2.0. It's basically just smoothing your interface. We have the dark theme and dynamic wallpaper. We still have the face unlock, which is really fast, and the in-display fingerprint reader. Still have Type-C. Like I said before, it's now IP68 rated. And now they do support Verizon, or now it's going to be carried into Verizon stores as well, which is really nice. And the pricing, which is probably one of the biggest things people want to talk about. So right now, currently, you can only get the 12 gigabyte of RAM, 256 gigabyte storage for $1,000. Don't kid yourself, guys. It's not $999. It's a $1,000 phone. If you want to get the cheaper option, the 128 gigabytes, you're going to have to wait 2 weeks. That one's going to start at $899. Moving on to the OnePlus 8 Pro, which I think is probably one of the more enticing devices. It still has the hole punch, but the differences in terms of the color is instead of the ultramarine blue, we have the interstellar glow, which is a really nice reflective color. On the back, it's similar to Samsung's phone that they have. The weight is 180 grams. On the display, we have 6.55. It's an AMOLED display, full HD plus of 1080p. Instead of the 120 hertz, we now have the 90 hertz, which I still think is pretty impressive over the 60 hertz that we have on a lot of phones. We have 1100 brightness. Everything else in terms of display are the same. The camera is different. We don't have the telephoto lens, as well as the ultra wide camera is now 16 megapixels. In terms of the internals, we have 8 and 12 variants of low power DDR4 memory. The battery is a little bit smaller. It's 4300, and there is no warp wireless charging or reverse wireless charging. And in terms of pricing on this one you can get today, or not today, starting tomorrow, is going to be the 256 gigabyte storage, and that one's going to start at $799. So with all that being said, I want to talk about my thoughts and opinions on these devices and OnePlus as a whole, because I do think OnePlus is in a very unique spot. And before I start, I also want to say that I looked at my analytics and noticed that a large chunk of my audience actually watches from India, which I think is really interesting, and I'm not sure how that's the case, but welcome to the channel. I know a lot of people in India probably already know what the OnePlus is, but in America it's probably not as known, but you're gonna learn today if you're watching from America if you don't know what the OnePlus is. So starting off with OnePlus and basically who they are and how they became so successful. So OnePlus was known as a flagship killer. And basically what a flagship killer is, it's taking all the nice internals that we want in these high-end phones and giving it to you in a value phone at a cheaper price. And I would say that when OnePlus was starting off, they were really successful because back then, these top smartphone companies didn't have a mid-range phone. All they had was their high-end phone, and that was it. And these top smartphone companies have realized that, hey, there is a huge market for value phones because people aren't paying $800 to $1,200 for our phones anymore. So I would say over the years, these top smartphone companies like Apple, Samsung, Google, Huawei, Oppo, all these companies, they've realized that, hey, we need to make cheaper phones to accommodate a vast majority of people, not just our super luxury premium devices. So another thing I noticed when they were talking in the launch event was they were throwing a little bit of statistics at the beginning, and I noticed that they were the #1 premium smartphone in India, which I think is really impressive because in a population with almost 1.4 billion people, you're competing against Apple, Samsung, Huawei, Oppo, all these other top smartphone companies, and to be #1, that is really impressive. Now, with OnePlus's mindset and just their whole motto of being #1 in terms of not only speed, but just being the best in general. So from a business standpoint, I would say that tackling China is not that smart just because the smartphone game over there is just really competitive. So the next best place you can go to after being #1 in India is, of course, the US. And in the US, it is still really competitive, but it's not as competitive because you don't have to compete with all these other Chinese smartphones because they're not really sold in the US. And on top of that, you really only have to compete with Apple and Samsung. And I'll have a link to a source I found down below, but they're just a list of all of the top smartphones in America that are sold or most popular. And they're all pretty much Apple and Samsung. Now, with that being said, while I watched the press conference, I did notice that OnePlus didn't really compare themselves to Samsung at all. And I think that's just because, objectively speaking, that OnePlus is a better value Android phone than the Samsung, period. If you look in terms of specs and price, the OnePlus just absolutely destroys the Samsung in almost every way possible. So there was a lot of comparisons to Apple, and I even got an Apple vibe from the entire event, as well as even when I went on their website, it really did look kind of like Apple. So I thought that was really interesting. I want to talk about what people care about in the US and pretty much the challenges I think OnePlus is going to face when it comes to dethroning Apple in the US to become the #1 premium smartphone company in the US. So I would say what people really care about in the US is popularity, brand, and I would even go as far as to say the more expensive something is, the better it is. So for example, let's say that I'm at a dinner with a couple friends and someone pulls out the iPhone 11 Pro Max. Everybody knows what that phone is. Someone pulls out the Samsung S20. Everybody knows what that is. Now I pull out the OnePlus 8 Pro, and of course everyone's going to be interested in what the device is because it's not a phone they've seen before. But if I told them that the phone was $699, they probably wouldn't remember the phone after that. But if I did tell them that, hey, this phone is $1,000, then that's gonna stick in their mind that, hey, this phone that this guy has is $1,000. I need to do some more research on this company. And now that OnePlus has a $1,000 phone, even though it might not be their best-selling phone, people are going to know who OnePlus is, and they're gonna look at their other lineups like, oh wow, they do have cheaper options for me, because it does range from $699 all the way up to $999, and not everyone is going to opt in to getting the most expensive phone. So with all that, I think that OnePlus, they're definitely aware of the price adjustments that they're doing, but I feel like they're so focused on trying to dethrone Apple and Samsung in the US that they're kind of neglecting their fans overseas, because I do think these phones are going to be more expensive overseas, and it's only going to make that choice of getting a OnePlus even harder. So I did do more research. I did have this down in the description of a source of the best-selling phones in India. And when you do the conversion rate, the OnePlus is a very hard phone to sell over there now, especially with the OnePlus 8. The phone just is too expensive, in my opinion, overseas. And you know, it really does suck to see OnePlus going in this direction, but I think it's something that the company definitely talked about, and they're just going to move forward with becoming a more premium flagship brand. That's pretty much what they're becoming. And you know, OnePlus went from being the affordable flagship killer to now they're just the traditional flagship $1,000 phone. But with all that being said, I do think that objectively speaking, OnePlus is the best Android phone you can get on the market today. I've never owned a OnePlus, but I always advocate to people who want to get an Android phone. I know you probably haven't heard of it, but just get a OnePlus. Trust me, everything you're getting from that device and what you're paying for is going to be simply the best. But I also do think that the OnePlus 8 Pro is really competing against the iPhone 11 Pro Max. Even the regular OnePlus 8 is competing against the iPhone 11 Pro Max, because if you get the same specs as the $999 version of the OnePlus 8 Pro, on Apple's website, it comes out to be $1,250. That's insane for a smartphone. But OnePlus is giving you all those, and I would say even more, for $1,000. But I will be getting the OnePlus 8 on my channel. I have to wait for, you know, regular people to order it. I'm only like a channel with 350 subscribers. So once it's able to be ordered, I will order one. I will do an unboxing on my channel. I will do a full review of the device, just the regular OnePlus, because, or yeah, the regular OnePlus 8, because I do think that's the device that most people should be talking about, because I think that phone is what OnePlus stands for. And I am also interested in the OnePlus 8T that might come out later in the year, and even the McLaren edition if they do decide to partner up with McLaren. And I think that's it. If you like the video, please make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you want to see more content from me, and I'm out. Much love.